Alright guys, welcome back to the channel. Rahim here. Nice to see that you're safe at home. Don't be going out. Singapore is on circuit breaker mode, alright? So you might as well just stay here, alright? And I got something to teach you. Let's go. So for today's episode, I'm going to help you shift from shooting auto to full-on manual mode. You'll be learning the three main components of photography, which is your shutter speed, aperture, and ISO. And how these three components will then combine to become your exposure. For each, I will share with you the users and the first question to ask when you are dialing in the settings. Oh, by the way, these are the basics of photography, which means that it doesn't matter whether you are holding on to a DSLR or point and shoot. As long as there's a manual mode, you're good to go. First component of a camera is the shutter. Right, the sound that you hear just now is the mechanical shutter of a DSLR. For smaller cameras like point and shoots and the cameras of smartphones, their shutters are electronically controlled, but essentially they do the same job. A shutter controls how much of the light entering through the lens gets to hit the sensor behind. Pressing the trigger opens and closes the shutter. This speed can be fractions of a second or as long as infinity, how long you want to hold the shutter. So now, the first question when you want to dial in your shutter speed, do you want to freeze the moment or do you want to show motion in your image? A shutter that is set at a fast shutter speed, right, which is fractions of a second, will capture and freeze that moment, while a slower shutter speed will then capture more of what is happening. So let's take the case of this moving fan. If I were to use a fast shutter speed, this will freeze the motion, while a slower shutter speed will show that it is moving. So here's where I can be creative and do the opposite. If I wanted the illusion of a floating item, I can use a fast shutter speed so that I can freeze the motion and look like it's floating, while if I was to use a slower shutter speed, then the illusion will not be the same. Next up is your aperture. Consider the fill the bucket theory, where the bucket is your sensor and then the water coming in is the light. If you had a small opening at the tap, it will take a while to fill up the whole bucket, isn't it? But if you were to fully open the tap, then a lot of water can come in at one time. Now, aperture also does another job, which is to control the depth of field, which is also called bokeh. Yes, I said bokeh, not bokeh. Like in the Japanese word karaoke, not karaoke. A small opening of the aperture gets everything, meaning to say if you were to take landscapes, you'd want a f16, f22. The smaller the hole, yeah, here's the weird number. The small hole means a bigger number, alright? So f22 really can get the whole landscape, while if you were to go to f1.8, 1.6, gets you a very shallow depth of field, alright? Focusing only on the subject and blurring everything else. So now let's take the moving fan as an example. I already have my shutter speed set. The question here is gonna be, how much bokeh do I want? Do I want to focus just on the subject or do I want everything else in the background to be seen also? Okay, so now here is the last of the three components, which is the ISO. ISO is basically how sensitive the film or sensor will be to absorbing light. In usage, it is actually considered more like fake light. You can add more of it to brighten an image, but of course, the higher up the ISO it goes, the more noise there will be in the image. The higher end cameras handle the noise better compared to the cheaper cameras. So here's the example of the fan again. I have my shutter and aperture already set. All I have left to do is dial in the ISO for a neutral exposure. Now here's the question to ask. Will this ISO setting get me the outcome that I desire? So here's a rule of thumb that you could follow. If you're out in the open in the bright daylight, you can set your ISO to about 100 to 200. Then if you're in a room or in a slightly darker place, ISO 400 up to 800 will be ideal. Only good cameras that I've seen, the sensor can hack it. The lower end cameras will give a lot of noise. You can always add on noise reduction, but smoothing out all the grain and noise will only make the picture muddy. So that's something you got to consider. Okay, here's one more part that I need to mention, which is not a component in itself, but actually the combination of all three of these components. This is exposure. In your camera, there should be a exposure gauge, which you will see when you are in manual mode. You use this scale to gauge whether your overall picture is a neutral, positive or negative exposure. So what do you want out of your image? Okay, I'm really starting to lose light from the window here. ISO is already up at 1000. Okay, so go and play around with these components in manual mode. Having a good grip of this will give you the proper tools to break down the images as you take them. You'll be able to critique yourself. You look at your own images and then it's like, oh, my shutter speed is too fast. Maybe I wanna open up the aperture a bit more, give it more bokeh and such things. By being able to critique your own work will make you a better photographer. Alright, that's all I have. Go out and go and get snapping. This is the digital era. I mean if you just snap as many photos as you like. Don't like, just delete them. Alright, you can snap 1,000 photos and like one today. Tomorrow you can snap 10 and have 10 great photos. Hope you've learned something today that brings you one step closer to being a better artist and creator. Subscribe down below, hit the notification bell to be informed of new episodes that are released every week. This is The Real Rahim. Thank you very nice, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.